thrills and spills have already happened during play-ins, so it's only fitting that we jump into groups with a lot of excitement. Welcome everyone to the World Group Stage Predictions here on my channel. We're going to be covering the first half of the World's Group Stage in this video, where we see a lot of competitive matchups. But before we jump into that sort of action, let's go over the results to the play-in stage. And oh boy, I'm actually amazed how well we did. 29 out of 36 games/series, because we're including knockouts in this. Wow. Let's just say the games/series we got wrong. EG versus Fnatic. We predicted EG, we lost that. DFM versus Loud. We predicted DFM, we lost that. DRX, RNG, our matchup of the week, we got wrong. Then we didn't see any losses until the last day of the regular group stage. Beyond versus Fnatic. I thought Beyond were gonna win, because I did not know the state of Fnatic during the week, because let's be honest, I predict early on in the week. As for the tiebreakers, we predicted Loud to beat EG, which was kind of a sheer luck prediction, because I thought, you know, I'm going to predict before I go to bed. And lastly, it's the Loud series versus DFM. We predicted Loud, and DFM actually won that one. No scoreline for that one. As for the last day of groups, well, play-ins, I predicted a Mad 3-2 over EG. Wow, that was not what we got. And the other game, we actually got a perfect prediction, RNG 3-1 over DFM. So, results from last week out the way, let's get into this weekend's games, starting with a nice juicy EU versus NA rivalry, refueled after EG's dominant performance over Mad. We're now going into C9 versus Fnatic. I'm interested by this one. I'm very interested, shall we say. United in rivalry. These two orgs have a history here at Worlds of being very dominant for the West. And looking at this matchup, I'm going to be brutally honest. Fnatic, I'm starting to favor a little bit more here at Worlds. They're getting to their regular split form that did decently. And as for C9, they're untested on this stage. And the big thing I need to point out here is Worlds play-ins gives teams at the tournament footage of teams on the patch. C9 come in unknown, Fnatic come in with knowledge about them. And that's where we start to see changes in approaches, because the group stage usually does not keep to the same power picks we saw in play-ins. So the likes of the Aatrox may not be as prevalent during the group stage, though I think he will be day one. So, who do I think is winning this one? Let's get into nitty gritty, where we actually focus in on these teams. I'm gonna say Fnatic, and it's not for the reasons you're thinking. Looking at the head-to-head matchups overall, it's a fairly similar sort of strength between these two teams. However, I feel that Humanoid, who I criticised heavily during playoffs, has been stepping up and performing exceptionally well for Fnatic right now, and that is giga-chatting them to another level. I feel Razork may be underperforming in his role, and that's possibly where we see Blabber sort of decimate the matchup, the mid-jungle duo matchup. But I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be a good old matchup. And yes, I am leaning on the fact that EU has a better record over NA at Worlds every single year. And yeah, that's the end of this first prediction. It's finally time to talk about my boys, more specifically the boys in blue, as Rogue take on DRX. This is going to be quite interesting. Because, you know, Rogue are a first seed and they're in a group that's pretty deadly to me. And I'm going to be honest, whenever I look at every group during Worlds group stages here, they all look scary. Because it's so open, I feel, for what groups have been made. I mean, sure, there's a couple of teams in each group that I think will advance. But I still think that Rogue will not finish first in their group. However, I don't think DRX will either. I've gone with a Rogue win here, and we've looked at Rogue this entire split, and how they've translated positioning that they've used into massive teamfight wins that blow games so far wide and open that it's very hard for other teams to close said gap. As for DRX, we looked at them versus RNG, and, you know, I said in that matchup it was RNG's fault they lost. DRX could quite have easily been in the knockout stages of play-ins, but RNG faltered against them and DRX capitalized. Rogue play it by a book. If that book works, DRX won't get that opportunity. And that's why I think that RNG... I've just done it. Rogue. I've literally just covered RNG, so why am I saying them in this matchup, you know? But, you know, Rogue are who I think will win here. Just because they're more well-drilled and will just stay on track with decent amount of prep for this squad. This originally was going to be my matchup of the week. It is CTBC Flying Oyster taking on 100 Thieves. You may be wondering, why is this a matchup of the week? Well, I'm going to be honest. It's the first time we're discussing a team that's been oh so close. In the PCS, we always know it as the PSG Talon region, and it hasn't been until this year, at this World Championships, the second place team, usually in the split, has made it, and it's a new team. CTBC Flying Oyster was formed this year, built around players who have made it to the World Championships before on Matchy Esports, in Mission, Gemini, and Koala. They're joined by Shun and Rest, who are relatively new to this stage, but honestly, the champion oceans this team brings suits this World Championships with their favouring of engage picks for Koala. They usually use their team to win lane and then push through dominance via Rest, who usually is just split pushing. Why am I bringing up split pushing here? Well, he's going up against Someday. This guy has been arguably the best top laner in North America for many a year. So, a team that's built around playing for top versus the best top of North America was an interest to me. And as such, this matchup adds a bit of spice. You've got a lot of players who are getting into this sort of form. And while, sure, 100 Thieves mainly play bot side with FBI and Huhi, I think it's going to be a very explosive bot side of the map, with Koala favouring Engage versus Huhi preferring Enchanters. It's going to be cool. I really can't wait to watch this one. My prediction is 100 Thieves win. I just think player caliber is slightly higher with the 100 Thieves in comparison to CTBC, Flying Oyster, such a fun name to say. But, you know, it could be I'm completely wrong, and somehow Flying Oyster beat 100 Thieves. It's time for Fatality as JDG take on EG. I wasn't really impressed by EG in the play-ins. In fact, they got very, very lucky, I feel, in facing the Mad Lions, who choke in best of fives. So I've gone with a JDG win here. I just think it's going to be a massive gap between these two teams. And we're going to see why LPL are favourites here at this World Championship. It always feels like if you win a World Championship, you change your name. It's T1 versus Edward Gaming Hiker. I think that's their name now. But yeah, let's cover a banger of a matchup. EDG, the current world champions, taking on former world champions from the LCK. Let's be honest, I want to watch this one so bad, but I know I'll be asleep. T1 are my predictions here to win this one. And you may be wondering, why have I gone for that? It's second seed versus third seed from a region. And you know, personally, it's going to be close because these two teams have been very up and down this split. Not like low down. I mean, in the upper heights of the league, but their performance has wavered from time to time. And it's why they finished where they finished, let's be honest. T1 had a phenomenal run during MSI, beating out their semi-finalists. I forget who they played. Oh yeah, we don't talk about that. And, you know, they then lost in the final to RNG. I don't think we'll have that same story of LPL magic against T1 here. I think these two teams matching up, EDG are far less like RNG. RNG are more calculated. They're the team that plays it slow in the LPL. EDG is the team that never could, but could last year, you know. For some reason, that's still their moniker. But T1 want that championship so goddamn badly. It's been a while since they were at the top of the world, so I've gone with them winning here and thriving during this World Championship. They are really treating us to LPL LCK matchups on day one as GenG take on RNG. It's Seed 1 versus Seed 4. I just need to preface that, but it's MSI World Champions, RNG, the Seed 4 team, and they're going up against GenG, who are just on form. Let's be honest, I'm surprised that they won their region purely based on namesake. They're usually third or fourth for the LCK, never this high up, and it just shocked me because I'll be honest, I don't watch too much LCK. I watch LPL primarily and LEC, and GenG, they've done well. And personally, I think when you watch them play, their style is so goddamn good this split. It's hard to break. And RNG will try and drag it out against you. But I think how the LCK have played throughout this tournament and how RNG have fumbled early games quite often, I think that this is going to be fairly easy for GenG to pick up in terms of this matchup, because RNG could quite easily fumble it. They've done it several games during the World Championships. In fact, I have had a pretty big rant in my teamfight breakdown for them versus DRX. When that's up, I don't know if it's up yet. You know, my schedule's so good. But anyway, GenG are winning the final game of day number 1. It's finally time to talk about my boys, more specifically the boys in blue, as Rogue take on DRX. This is going to be quite interesting. because, you know, Rogue are a first seed and they're in a group that's pretty deadly to me. And I'm gonna be honest, whenever I look at every group during Worlds group stages here, they all look scary because it's so open, I feel, for what groups have been made. I mean, sure, there's a couple of teams in each group that I think will advance, but I still think that Rogue will not finish first in their group. However, I don't think DRX will either. I've gone with a Rogue win here, and we've looked at Rogue this entire split and how they've translated positioning that they've used into massive teamfight wins that blow games so far wide and open that it's very hard for other teams to close said gap. As for DRX, we looked at them versus RNG, and, you know, I said in that matchup it was RNG's fault they lost. DRX could quite have easily been in the knockout stages of play-ins, but RNG faltered against them and DRX capitalized. Rogue play it by a book. If that book works, DRX won't get that opportunity. And that's why I think that RNG... I've just done it. Rogue. I've literally just covered RNG, so why am I saying them in this matchup, you know? But, you know, Rogue are who I think will win here. Just because they're more well-drilled and will just stay on track with decent amount of prep for this squad. It's time to wrap up my way through the rest of the predictions because, spoiler alert, other than one game coming up, we've covered every team. So let's get through the ones that I'm yet to cover, and we'll cover at the end the other two games. EG versus G2, I've gone with a G2 win. Fnatic versus T1, I've gone with a T1 win. C9 EDG, I've gone with a C9 shock win. Damwon Kia versus JDG, I have gone with a JDG win. That's going to be an actual banger. Next day, 100 Thieves versus GenG, I've gone with a GenG win. That should be a good matchup. EDG versus Fnatic, that's got a lot of history behind it. I've gone with an EDG win. T1 versus C9, I've gone with a T1 win. CFO RNG, shock alert, I've gone with a CFO win. TES DRX, I've gone with a TES win. JDG versus G2, I've gone with G2. Rogue versus Top, I really want to watch that matchup. I've gone with a Top win. Damwon versus EG, I've gone with a Damwon win. 100 Thieves versus RNG, I've gone with 100 Thieves. GenG versus CFO, I've gone with GenG. And GAM versus DRX, I have gone with a GAM win. Apologies for having to speed through these predictions, but I need to get this video out, let's be honest. And obviously, it's a bit of a spitball for all these teams, because, you know, they're going to face off against each other next week in part 2, where we can focus in a bit more on these matchups with a bit more hindsight, shall we say. So, thank you very much for joining me for this breakdown and prediction. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like down below, subscribe if you're new if you want to. I'll see you guys next time for set predictions, as well as our teamfight breakdown between GAM and Rogue. Peace out. He's back as Levy returns to Worlds, back with GAM, who also make a return appearance here to the World Championships. And for their first matchup in Group C, it is up against TES, or Top Esports as they're known in the LPL. Oh boy, what a game to actually return to the stage. And I'm kind of sad I'm not covering this one, let's be honest. Why do I say that? It's because it's going to be pure and utter chaos. Let's be honest. Top can do whatever they like, they usually do. Knight has a very explosive pool, and you've got Jackie Love. Of course it's going to be interesting. Top have kind of been revitalized this split after a shaky 2021, but now coming into 22, they've just been looking pretty dominant. I've been watching a hell of a lot of their games during the LPL regular season, and they've been performing pretty well. As for GAM, let's be honest, it's GAM. They are the wildcard team and the team everyone loves. It's been a shame without them at the World Championships for the past few years, and the reason being is they just provide utter chaos. And that chaos is usually very hard to deal with, and personally, it's why I think what we're going to see here is just an absolute barn burner of a matchup that realistically could go either way. But who do I think wins? Well, unfortunately for the VCS representative, I have gone with Top Esports. I just think Top will get the game in such a controllable state for them. They managed to just beat out GAM, and that's sad to say, but that's how Top have been playing this split. It's a lot more controlled in how they approach the game, and as such, it's going to make Group C very hard for anyone other than Top to realistically win it. We may not be covering Top versus GAM, but we sure as hell are covering Rogue versus GAM. It's matchup of the week time. VCS taking on the LEC. A lot of hype for me here. I'm just going to say it right now. Rogue are the textbook team. I've said it every single split so far that they've been in league. And, you know, the textbook team facing up against pure anarchy, pure chaos. That textbook kind of gets thrown out the window, doesn't it? Rogue showed during playoffs they can be flexible, they can bring surprises, and it did surprise G2 in that grand finals that we broke down. Be sure to check that out if you haven't. And, you know, I'm really thinking GAM might think, hey, it's Rogue, we can just play whatever. We just be crazy. They can't deal with it. But Rogue may be just the same book. They may just say, we'll flip the script and do the exact same. My issue with Rogue, though, here at this championships is they'll probably resort to putting Odo very, very weak side. They'll probably stick him on duty if they can, which is kind of sad because there's champions in the meta right now that I think would be far better for Odo to be playing. But I feel Rogue are the sort of team to put their top laner on a tank and just hope that they survive. That's my thoughts here. And personally, looking at this matchup, it's going to be explosive. And I think, sadly, if you expected me to say a VCS win, I'm going to be saying a Rogue win over the VCS League representative of GAM. And yeah, it's just going to be overconfidence from GAM, who probably will win out early, just get decimated late game by just comp and Malrang being tricky. That's how I feel it'll go. Pure and simple league from Rogue.